Hey Baker Art friends, it's Mrs. Herbay. We are going to be getting into something totally new this week. We're going to be creating with clay, and I'm going to show you guys how to make a clay bird, and I'm going to teach you a little bit about how to work with clay. So you're going to need this container that I sent home that has your clay inside. You're also going to need just like a piece of cardboard, or this is actually just a cereal box that I took and folded this way, something like that, or a cracker box. You're going to need that, and you're also just going to need a little cup that just has maybe a little bit of water in it. All right, and then you're also going to need the two clay tools that I taped to the top of your container, which was the wooden skewer and a popsicle stick. So if you want to go gather up all those things, and then we'll get started. All right, guys, so before we get started, there's just a couple things about clay that I want to tell you about. The first is that you don't want to handle the clay too much, because what happens is clay has water inside of it, and the more that you handle it with your hands, the more moisture is absorbed away from the clay and into your hands, and it evaporates, and the clay becomes dry fairly quickly. So you don't want to just keep handling the clay. Another thing is, you may say, oh wow, this is a big mound of clay, I'm going to make all these other things for it, and then just keep them at home. If this clay, you can make things out of this clay, and they will dry. But the problem is, if you don't send those things back to school and we don't put them in a kiln, which is a super hot fire to fire those things, eventually the clay, they will just break apart and crumble. So anything that you make that you want to stay needs to dry, and then it needs to be fired in a kiln, okay? The other thing is that in order to put two pieces of clay together, we have to do something called slipping and scoring. And in order to do that, we need to create a little bit of sort of a clay and water mush. So the first thing I want you to do before we get started is pull a little bit of clay off the end of that little block of clay that I gave you, and just kind of break off some pieces and kind of put them into the water. And you don't need a lot, and you can just kind of stir it around with your popsicle stick, and you'll see if you kind of push on it, it starts to dissolve a little bit and get a little bit sticky and slimy. Okay, we're just going to let that sit in there. Okay, now the first thing that we're going to do to make our bird is that we're going to make the head of the bird. So what I want you to do is just pull off a piece of clay, probably no bigger than like this, and if you start to kind of go like this and roll it into a ball, you'll see here I have a ball. It's maybe about the size of like a nice big gumball, okay? And yours, your ball could be a tad bit, a hair bigger if you wanted to. And if you, let's say you want it to be a little bit bigger, what you can do is you can add some more clay and then kind of squish it together. And then you're just going to roll. I'm just rolling my hand like in a circular motion. Okay. And now I have a little bit bigger of a ball. And if you want to, you can, if it seems a little bit dry or harder, you can stick your finger, just a dab of water. But the other thing is you don't want too much water. So you don't want this to be so sticky and wet that you have clay mush like all over your hands. That means then that there's too much water. Okay, so here's the size ball that you want to make. Another thing you could do is try rolling it, rolling the piece of clay that you grab on here until you get your circle. Okay, so go ahead, get your circle, and then I'll show you the next step. All right, guys, so for the next step, what we're going to do is we are going to form the beak of the bird, and we are going to do it by pinching our clay. So what you want to do is you want to take your pointer finger and your thumb, and all I'm going to do is put it on either side of the ball, and I'm going to squeeze. And now you see, oh, check that out. It looks like this. So I've kind of squeezed and pulled it out like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my 2 fingers and my thumb, and then I'm going to squeeze it the other way too. And what I'm doing is I'm kind of squeezing and pulling so that now I have this beak sort of formed. And what you can do is you can, if you need to smooth it a little bit with your fingers, you can. Again, if it seems a little dry, just put just a dab of water onto your finger. And don't be afraid to really work the clay. The great thing about clay is that it is pretty user-friendly. So I'm just smoothing. If you would like the beak of your bird to be a little bit longer, I'm just kind of pushing. And there I have the beak of my bird. Okay. Ta-da. Okay. Let's say you tried and it didn't work and it's all a complete disaster. And it's not a disaster. What I might do is just put that piece of clay aside. Okay. Grab another chunk. Okay, I've got this chunk here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of start to kind of squish, and then I'm rolling it. You can try doing it on the okay, and I'll just roll myself another gumball size ball. Again, just put a little water on it if I need to kind of smooth it. And then I can try again. So here's my ball, right? I'm going to take my pincher fingers. I'm going to put them here on the edge and I'm going to squeeze, okay? You want to squeeze fairly hard, okay? And you'll see that the clay is starting to get drawn out like this. And then what I'm going to do is then I'm going to squeeze the other way. So I'm squeezing from the top and I'm squeezing from the side. And what that does is that allows this clay to come out like that. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to smooth this just like that. Okay? So now I have my bird head. Okay? So I'm just going to set that right there. And now we're going to think about the bird's body. So with this time, I'm going to take a bigger chunk, more like, this may be a little too much, maybe about like this size, okay? And same thing, I'm just going to kind of try to roll it, but this time I want to roll it more into like an oval, or like a big, sort of like a small potato. I guess that would be a good description of it. So here's my small potato, okay? And I've just kind of smoothed it. One of the ways you can do that is to kind of, you can squish it together and roll it like this, okay? And now I've got this potato. Now, when we made our birds, when we drew our birds, a very long time ago, you recall that the bird's body, we called it, was shaped like a watermelon slice, right? So it was curved on the bottom and flat on the top. So what we can kind of do is we can kind of try to mimic that shape, but as a form, by kind of smoothing the clay, and see how I'm kind of creating that shape there. All right. Now birds have a neck, so I want to bring one of those edges kind of up like this as a neck for the bird. okay? And then we also know that birds have a tail. So the same thing, what I'm going to do is, that I did before is, and you can do it with your right hand because your right hand's probably stronger. So here's my little neck of the bird. So this is going to be where I attach the head. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my first two fingers and my thumb, and I'm just going to squish, like squeeze and pull. And you'll see, oh, I'm starting to pull out the tail. And then I'm just going to do it the other way too. So I'm just kind of squeezing and pulling. And then you see, hey, check that out. I've added the bird's tail. Okay. And so now, and again, you can smooth. If your clay feels a little bit dry, again, you can just dip your finger into the water, but I don't really have a lot of water, just a little bit. If you put too much water, like I mentioned, what happens is that the clay will get really, really mushy, kind of like how it's in here, and sticky, and then that's where you need to go wash your hands and kind of let the clay dry out a little bit. Okay, so now I've got my body shape where it kind of fits into that little watermelon here, and then I added the tail kind of coming off like this. Okay, and then this is the part where the neck is. All right, so if you can see this is kind of where the head and the neck will join together. All right, now one of the things that you need to do when you join clay together is slip and score. And what that means is that this is called the slip. So slip is when you take clay and put it into water and it makes sort of this little sticky, mushy gray stuff. Okay. And that's what would happen. If you had really wet hands and I kept touching my clay with my wet hands, it would start to dissolve that clay and it would become like this big sticky mess. Okay. But the sticky mess is sort of like the glue that holds clay parts together. And scoring is when you're going to take your, this skewer, and what we're going to do is right at the top here of the neck where we want to join this, I'm just making some lines this way and some lines that way. So you can see that. And then on the bottom part of the bird's head where I want to attach it, I'm also going to make some sort of horizontal lines and then vertical lines. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip my finger into this clay mess sort of, and I'm going to put some of this stickier gray stuff, the slip, onto the bottom of the head and on this top part of the neck. All right. So then to join these two together, I'm just going to kind of squish them together, just like that. All right. And it may still look a little bit silly and not quite joined. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my finger and I'm just going to kind of smooth it and sort of pull some of that down too. And kind of smooth it. Don't be afraid to really... you can also use your popsicle stick, and what you can do is you can use that to kind of smooth and move the clay. And you can see here it's kind of rough right here where I've kind of joined it. And so then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently take my finger and kind of smooth it. Here's where the neck is. If I feel like I need to slide some clay over, sliding some clay over. The tail might have gotten a little bit funny. Okay, you might say, well, I wish this bird's body is maybe a little bit thin. If you wanted your bird's body to be a little bit wider, you could take a little bit of clay, just rest it on the side that you think needs to be a little bit wider. And then just kind of smooth it on. And you can see now I made the bird's body a little bit wider there. I can do the same thing up around the neck. Let's say I see here, oh, there's sort of like a little bit of divot I want to fill in. You can take this fresh clay and just kind of smooth it. In there a little bit, and then I kind of like how I shaped the side of the bird's body. So see how it's flat on this side. So I'm going to take one more little pinch, not too much, just rest it on the side here, and then I'm just taking my thumb and I'm smoothing. Okay, so now kind of checking this out, seeing how I like it. If the head's on a little bit crooked or there's some bumps sticking out, this is the nice part where you can kind of check it out from all sides and kind of see what you might need to do. Again, if it seems like it's a little bit dry, you could always dip your finger just a tiny little bit. You don't want a lot of water. And feeling like that's pretty good. Now, the last thing our bird needs is wings. So I'm going to show you how to do the wings. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set the bird here off to the side, okay? And we're going to take another pinch of clay. Again, maybe just like about this much. Actually, maybe I'll take just a tad bit more. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to kind of smooth it so it's a little bit flatter. So I'm going to put the clay onto the cardboard. Now, here's the thing. You don't want it to be too thin, because if it's too thin, what will happen is when it dries, it will break. So you can kind of see the thickness of the clay right here. You don't want it to be any thinner than that. So if I'm making a wing for my bird and I want it to be bigger than this, guess what I need to do? I need to grab some more clay, and I'm just going to do like what I showed you guys before. Is I'm just going to kind of smooth it down together. Now, when we talked, or when we created our wings for our bird the last time, it was the shape of, the wing was sort of shaped like this, right? So again, with that in mind, you can shape your clay in that same way. But one of the ways you can do that is you can just sort of make a flat disc of clay. And that's kind of what I'm doing. And you want it to kind of be the same thickness all the way around. So again, this is about how thick it is. And then what I can do is I can draw. So I want to see, okay, I can draw the shape of the wing that I want into the clay. And here's the other cool thing. If I draw and I don't like it, and I didn't push too hard in there, you can just kind of smooth that off. So I'm just going to make this teardrop shape. Okay. And then I'm just going to push a little harder once I like that. So I'm taking my wooden skewer and I'm just pushing. And voila. I have wing number 1. Now, what you can do is, if you would like the wings to be the same, so once you have the first one, and I'm just going to kind of try it out to see, is this the right size wing for my bird? And it seems like it is, okay? So what I'm going to do is, then I'm going to take another chunk of my clay, and I'm going to do exactly like what I did before, and I'm going to take it and kind of make it into a smooth pancake. And again, we don't want it to be a really thin, flimsy pancake. You can put it down on the cardboard and kind of smooth it out a little bit. So you can see mine's still fairly thick, which is good. So I'm going to set this down and see, oh, hey, check it out. It's big enough. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace around it with this skewer. It's like sort of like your pencil. And then again, I'm just going to take and just kind of push. There's that. And there's that. Okay. And then the edges might be a little bit boogery, and you can kind of smooth them. If it needs to be flattened a little bit, you can kind of smooth it. Okay. So I've got my 2 wings now. And so the next step is we're going to attach the wings. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video. I'm going to pause it and give you a chance to get to this point. So you're going to have 2 wings, and then you're going to have your bird with body with the head attached and the tail. Okay. So once you have this, then we'll get ready to attach the wings. All right, guys. So for the last part, we're going to figure out where we want to attach the wings. So I'm going to kind of play around with, do I want the bird to have the wings up, sort of like it's flying, or is the bird kind of cozied in where the wings are close to the body? And you can kind of decide that. All right. I think I might want to have my bird's wings kind of up a little bit. Okay. So what you're going to do is I'm going to take my wooden skewer, and I'm just going to trace around the area where the wing is kind of sitting on the body. So you can kind of see, oh, there's this area right here where the wing is going to attach to the body. So again, to slip and score, so I'm going to score this area with my wooden skewer. So you want to kind of rough it up so it's nice and roughed up like that. And then I'm going to take the wing, and on this side I'm going to go like that way, go like that way. Okay. Then I'm going to take my slip, my mushy clay, and kind of spread it on there. And then I'm also going to spread a little bit on the wing. Okay. And then I'm going to stick the wing to the body. And I'm just going to kind of push. And then what you can do is I'm just going to kind of smooth it. And you can use your fingers, or you can even use your the edge of your popsicle stick to kind of push the clay down and smooth it in there. And so right now the wing is kind of close but I'm going to kind of raise it up a little bit. So you can see I'm kind of smoothing it where it's now attached to the body. And I'm also going to look on the other side and I can see, oh, there's kind of some of the slip and the scoring. So again, you could take your popsicle stick and just kind of slide it in there, and it kind of does a nice job of kind of smoothing it out. When you make things out of clay, they're three-dimensional, so they're a sculpture. And unlike 2D art, a sculpture has can be looked at from all sides. It can be looked at from underneath and above. So you really have to look at all of the parts that you're creating to make sure that they look how you want them to. All right, so I think I have this wing on here like this, and I kind of like it. So my bird is like the wings up a little bit, okay? And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and attach the other wing. Now, it might be a little trickier for you because you've never done this before. So I'm gonna pause and give you a second to get your first wing attached, and then we'll go through it again on the next one. All right, guys, I'm ready for my second wing. So same thing. I'll decide which side shape I think is the best. And again, I'm gonna figure out the wings are attached sort of up here. If I want the wing to kind of be up that way, then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my wooden skewer and I'm just gonna draw around that edge. And I can see here's where my lines were. So then I'm going to do my scoring. And some people might say, well, why do you have to slip and score? Or some people might say, well, it looks like it's stuck to the clay. It's fine. You don't have to do this. But the reason you have to slip and score is because clay has water inside of it. It's made up of minerals and chemicals and sort of dirt and different things from the earth. But one of the big ingredients in clay is water. And what happens is when the clay dries, the water evaporates and it goes away. And so if you think about that, if the water evaporates out of the clay, what's actually going to happen is the clay is going to shrink up a little bit. So if I stick two pieces together and they seem like they're stuck together, and this happens quite a bit, but if I haven't slipped and scored the pieces together and they both shrink, what happens is that when they dry, they fall apart. So people will mistakenly think, oh, this looks good, it's just stuck together. I didn't have to slip and score it. But then what happens is when the piece starts to dry, parts start falling off and people get upset and they're like, why is all this falling apart? And it's because they didn't slip and score it. So the slipping and scoring sort of creates sort of a stickiness, sort of like glue, that allows the clay to stay together even when the water evaporates and the clay shrinks. So here I've got my second wing, and I'm again smoothing where it's attached to the body. And then I'm going to look down in here. I'm going to use my popsicle stick because I can't really get my finger in there. And I'm going to kind of smooth in there. All right, so what I want you to do is play around, get your wings attached, kind of position them how you like it. And then the last thing is I want you to then see if your bird will sit. So my bird is not going to sit. So you want to kind of push it down just a little bit onto the cardboard until it actually will sit upright. Because if it can't sit, then we can't really enjoy it once it's completely finished. So, and what I did was then it just kind of made like this little flat area at the bottom here. So now my bird can sit. So go ahead, play around with attaching your wings, and then after you do that, I'm going to show you how to add all the final details to your clay bird. Alright guys, now we're going to get on to the last part of our bird. What I wanted to do though is I wanted to show you guys, this is a finished bird. It's not completely finished, but if you'll notice, this bird and this bird look different from one another. And one of the things that's different is that this bird, the color of this bird, and this bird looked like this bird before I put it into the kiln and fired it. But then once it was fired, it changed into this whitish color, and now it's ready to be glazed. And you guys, we will actually be putting glaze on our birds. And then this is a bird's nest that my second grade students and I made a couple years ago. We made bird's nests that were kind of like this, and I think it might be fun. We'll be doing that as well for our birds. So if you wanted to make, I know in the past, some of my students, because you might see, oh, you have all this extra clay, right? And I'm going to talk to you about what you can do with that extra clay, but before we finish. But before I do that, let's actually finish up our current bird, because you'll notice the longer that clay sits, the more it dries out. And so one thing too that you could do is when you're not using the clay, you can kind of keep this lid on it. And another thing is, if it seems like it's drying out, you could have your mom or dad give you a damp paper towel, kind of like the one that I had wrapped around it. And if they wrap it around the clay and then you put the lid on, it'll kind of moisten it back up for you. Okay. So one thing that this bird is missing is texture and details, right? It looks like a bird, but it doesn't have any other details. So I'm going to show you some options that you can do, but you are sort of the artist and the creator of this bird, so you can kind of decide what you want to do. One of the things that you can do to add an eye to your bird, which I think is kind of fun, is you can take the end of the wooden skewer. It's sort of like a tiny little circle, and what you can do is you can just kind of gently poke it in there and check it out. There's a bird's eye. Now let's say you put it in the wrong spot and you're like, I don't really like that. I don't think that looks good. Well, again, you could just take your finger, dip it just a tiny little bit into the slip water, and I can smooth it away if I didn't like it. But I think I did like it, so I'm going to put it back just like that. And then another cool thing that you can do is you can use the other end, the sharp end of the wooden skewer, and you can draw other details. So like maybe I want to draw around the bird's eye. And you're going to notice that there's kind of like these little clay boogies that kind of come up. And that's okay. You can kind of leave them there. And then once the clay dries a little bit more, they can kind of brush off. So there I put another little outline around the bird's eye. Another thing you could do is you can sort of carve in where the bird's beak is. See how I'm carving in like a little line there, and then I'm gonna bring it around to the other side right here. Sorry, put it down so you guys can see it. Okay, and so now I've got that, and the clay is still somewhat moldable. It's you'll notice when the clay starts to dry, it's going to get a little bit cold. It's going to feel cold to the touch. So here, I actually don't like it going up like that. I want it to go a little bit more, but see how I was just able to smooth that how I wanted it. So I'm going to use this to add the beak details. And then I can also, then I'm going to go back to the other side and I'm going to add the other eye. So poke that in there. And then I'm drawing around it. And I see, oops, I went a little too far. So again, here's the cool thing. If you don't like it, you can just smooth it away. Make sure that's, I'm just going to do it a little closer to the okay. And then the other thing that you can do is, which is kind of cool, is we can start to add texture to the bird. So one of the ways that you could do that is, let's say for the wing texture, for example, you can take the wooden skewer, and I know when we drew our birds, we talked about how the wings, the feather wings, are kind of longer and bigger. So you can kind of use the wooden skewer to kind of draw those in like that. If you would like to. Maybe I want to make and the thing is, again, if you draw it and you don't like it, now to smooth it, I'm putting my thumb kind of behind the wing because it's not very thick or sturdy. So let's say you wanted to kind of I just think I might want to make the feathers a little smaller than I did initially. So I'm just drawing in and you'll notice I have my thumb underneath the wing here. So when I push on it, I'm not moving the wing. But you can position your bird however it's most comfortable for you to add your details. Okay, so now I've got the wing and sort of the feather texture of the wing. And when we made our birds in the past, we talked about how, when we drew our birds, we talked about how birds have sort of like these little downy feathers. So you can also use the wooden skewer. It's kind of cool to make these little little scratches into the clay, which also give the bird some texture and some interest. And you can try doing little strokes or bigger strokes. And again, if you don't like something, you can always smooth it out. Another cool thing that you can do is you can take the end of your popsicle stick, and what I like to do is if you just kind of push the end like this, it kind of makes these cool You can kind of see, it kind of makes these cool marks that I think look sometimes like bird feathers too. And you can kind of play around with those. And you can use those. The thing is, you can use a combination of techniques. Like if you want to use this on the body part here, but then going up into the head, you want to use your wooden skewer, you can do that. It's totally up to you. You may think, I don't want to draw the wings in like that. I want to kind of use this. Or maybe you want to use this with. The only thing is you need to just hold your hand behind so you don't totally. But the other thing is if the wing gets bent, the beautiful thing about clay is, let's say the wing got bent back like this, right? Well, while it's still soft, I can just kind of bend it back the way I want it once I'm done kind of adding all my texture into it. Okay? And then I also don't forget about the back of the wing too, because we can see it. So you can, again, add whatever way you decided to add texture to the front part of the wing. You're going to go ahead and do it to the back part of the wing too. So I'm just drawing, I don't know if you guys can see because of the shadow, but I'm just drawing those same shapes to mimic bird feathers on this side too. Like that. And I might fill in a little with a little bit of texture there. I might want to, on this back part, sort of rough that up. Again, if I want to poke out the wing a little bit. So this is kind of the fun part. And here's another thing. If after you make the bird and you're kind of like worn out, you're like, wow, that was a lot of work, and you're not ready to add the texture to it, one thing that you could do is you could have, I don't think the bird is probably not going to fit back into the container, but if your parents have like a Ziploc bag, you could gently place the bird into a Ziploc bag and maybe just don't put a damp paper towel around the bird, but kind of put a damp paper towel in with the bird and Ziploc the bag. It will stay good for a couple days, and then you could go back and add your feather texture later too. That's an option. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and finish up the texture on this guy, and then I'll show you how he looks before I end our videos. And then I'll also, at the end, I'll explain to you what you can do with your extra clay. All right. All right, guys. So my little birdie is done. I have drawn all the texture onto him using my wooden skewer and my popsicle stick. And I think he looks pretty cool. One last test to see, yes, he can sit upright. So when your bird is all finished like this, what you can do is you can just put him in a safe spot. You could take you could take like a Giant Eagle bag or a grocery bag and just maybe cut it and just gently drape it over top of it for the rest of the week, just so that it slowly dries. And then I'm going to have you let it dry at your house this week, and then your parents can bring it back next week. And I'll have more instructions on how they should package it up next week. But what you want to do is, in the meantime, just put your bird aside, let him chill out, let him dry. Now, if you happen to have extra clay, which you probably most certainly will, And I am totally fine with you using the remainder of the clay to make some things that you might like to make. But one of the things I want you to think about is this. You can't make something that is super, super solid and big. So like if you sent this back to school, right, it's so solid and it's so big, it would have to dry for a really, really, really long time. So think about making something that's not big and solid. Feel free to make another animal, or I know kids in the past have made baby birds, littler birds for the nest, or eggs for the nest, or let's say you want to try your hand at a different kind of animal. That's okay too, but don't forget that when you add parts and pieces to one another, you need to make sure you slip and score the parts together so that stuff doesn't fall off. So for example, let's say I was doing a dog. So I'm just going to, and you would do a dog the same, or a cat the same way you would do the bird, where you would start with a circle for the head, right? But all animals have a snout, right? So I would kind of push out, but the snout's not going to be quite as pointy, right? But it's still going to stick out. Okay, so there's kind of my dog or cat snout. But let's say you wanted to make ears for your dog. So let's say I have my ear here, and let's say your dog's ears were kind of long and floppy. Okay, you don't want it to be too thin, so this does have some thickness, right? And then same thing, if I was going to attach this ear to my dog, I wouldn't just stick it on, but what I would do is where I want that ear to go, I would kind of draw a line there. I would score it up, and then I'm going to score up the ear on the back side. I'm going to take my ooey gooey slip, put it on both parts, and then kind of give it a nice press together. And you'll notice some of this slip squished out. That's okay. You can just kind of take the edge of your skewer and kind of slide it along there. You can kind of slide it up in there, and you can kind of smooth it out with your finger. And if I wanted it sticking out more, I could stick it out more. And there I've got my dog ear. Okay, so that is just as a reminder, slipping and scoring, but feel free to kind of make whatever you would like. When you are done with the slip, do not wash this down your parents' drain, but just simply throw it away. Okay, that's why I don't have a lot of water in here. You can just throw it away. And let's say you want to come back later. Let's say you don't want to make anything right now, but you want to make something later. Again, just take a damp paper towel. Have your parents give you a damp paper towel. Wrap it around the clay. Put it in the container. Put the lid on. Actually, if you have a small enough container, you could probably just put the slip in there. Put the lid on. And then you can come back to this later. So as long as you keep the clay moist and dry, or moist and away and covered, it lasts for a while. Okay. So again, you can keep this. If you're going to make something though, I would make something within the next week or so, just so that when we go to fire everything, we can fire it all together. The other thing is that the reason why you had this cardboard mat is you're going to have all this, dirty, yucky clay dust. Again, you're also just going to want to, you could save the mat, but you want to just take the clay dust and maybe slip it into the trash, but you can easily reuse the mat again. All right. Any questions? As always, you can, we'll touch base on Thursday. And if you have any questions before that and you need me, just send an email or give a shout out. I'd be happy to help. I hope you have so much fun with this, and I look forward to seeing what you make.